OOP's husband accuses her of baby trapping him with a planned baby, loses everything. My husband, M35, and I, F32, have been married for 7 years. We met as neighbors, living door to door, and the connection was instant. Honestly, it felt like a fairy tale. I've always thought that what made our marriage so strong was the friendship we shared and the trust we had in each other. However, lately, my husband seems to feel otherwise, and honestly, I don't know how to handle it. It all started recently when my husband found out that his friend, Jeff M34, had been a victim of what he calls a baby trap. Basically, Jeff's wife, F32, stopped taking birth control and got pregnant just a few months into their relationship. The worst part is that she didn't confess it to him until after they were married. Jeff comes from a very conservative family, something his wife knew well, and it led him to feel like he had no choice but to marry her after learning about the pregnancy. Now, even though the dynamic between them is completely dysfunctional, he feels obligated to stay because he made a vow and can't break it, especially now that there's a child involved. I don't understand why, but this situation has deeply affected my husband. For context, I am 4 months pregnant with our first child. Yesterday, my husband asked me if I was trying to trap him with a baby. At first, I laughed because, honestly, I thought he was joking. But no, he was completely serious. He insisted so much that I finally responded by saying that we've been married for 7 years and that a baby wasn't going to trap him any more than he already was. That answer didn't sit well with him at all. He told me that there's no time limit for someone to fall into a trap like that, and that my intentions weren't pure, especially since I was treating his concerns like a joke. Then he added that, although he had trusted me in the past, my reaction had made him completely doubt me. At that moment, I didn't know what he wanted from me or how I was supposed to respond. So, I told him that we should talk about it in the morning with a cooler head. But when I woke up today, he was already gone. What I did find was a rather nasty message from his brother M28, accusing me of forcing my husband into this pregnancy, even though it was a joint decision from the start. My husband isn't answering my calls or messages, and I'm completely lost. I don't know how to move forward from here. Any advice? Honestly, any words of support would be greatly appreciated right now.
Update 1.
I'm not sure if I can post here again, but I felt the need to update everyone who took the time to advise me and send me such kind messages. I couldn't respond to anyone because my previous post was quickly locked. But I've read every comment and message I received. I'm very grateful for all the support. While reading the comments, I realized something important. Everyone was right. I wasn't angry enough. My husband insulted not only me, but also our marriage in a very hurtful way. At first, I didn't fully process it. I was so confused and hurt that it didn't even occur to me to feel angry. But I think I just needed time for it all to sink in. In the midst of everything, I called my best friend F31, who has been a true rock in my life. When I told her what was happening, she showed up at my house with chocolate, ready to support me. She was furious when she heard the whole story. She's one of those people who can't stand injustice, and her reaction made me feel less alone. After I finished venting, she called her husband M34, who is a family lawyer. He arrived shortly after, and once he heard the whole story, he told me he'd be happy to represent me if I decided to go through with a divorce. Honestly, this man is a saint. He assured me that he'd start drafting the divorce papers on Monday. Not long after my best friend's husband arrived, my mother-in-law, F66, showed up at my house, and she brought my husband in the car. Basically, she had dragged him to my door. My mother-in-law, who thankfully is an incredibly smart woman, told me that my husband had shown up at her house late the night before, saying he was convinced I was trapping him with this baby. According to her, she wasted no time in giving him a serious scolding before bringing him here to apologize. When my husband came into the house, he looked more like a worm than a man. He couldn't even look me in the eye the entire time. The only thing he said was that he was scared about becoming a father and had projected his fears onto me. He also admitted he wasn't sure he was ready for that kind of commitment, but that he would take responsibility, as if he were some kind of hero for doing so. Insert a big eye roll here. I couldn't hold back and called him a coward. I told him he should stay with his parents until I was ready to talk to him. At that moment, I didn't want to mention anything about the divorce papers because I wasn't sure how he'd react.
but he'll find out soon enough.
Before he left, I also showed my mother-in-law the text message my brother-in-law M28 had sent me, accusing me of having forced my husband into this pregnancy. Her face darkened like a storm cloud instantly. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I'm sure it won't be anything good. Right now, I'm completely exhausted. I just want to curl up in my bed and cry myself to sleep. My best friend offered to stay with me tonight, and we're planning to watch some silly movies to distract ourselves a bit. I've also made an appointment with a therapist for next week because I feel like I need to process all of this with someone who can help me find clarity. This situation has left me devastated. My marriage, which I always thought was solid as a rock, seems to be crumbling before my eyes. I'm so sorry if this update has a sad ending, but right now, this is how I feel. Tired, hurt, and completely lost. I promise to update if there's anything more important to share. For now, I just want to rest and try to find some peace. Thank you again for all the support. It means more to me than I can express. Update 2. Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for all the kind messages, comments, and advice you've sent me. I was genuinely surprised to receive so many requests for an update, so here I am to let you know how things are going. It's been a couple of intense weeks, but slowly, things are starting to settle down. First, the good news. I had my latest ultrasound a few days ago, and everything is perfect with the baby. My mother-in-law came with me to the appointment, and she was a great support. The doctor confirmed that my baby is healthy, and most excitingly, it's a girl. I can't describe the joy I felt in that moment. I was so overwhelmed that I almost cried tears of happiness. My mother-in-law was also thrilled and deeply moved to be there with me. The news that she's going to have a granddaughter seems to have given her even more enthusiasm to support both me and the baby. After the ultrasound, my mother-in-law organized a family lunch. At first, I wasn't very convinced about attending. Honestly, I was nervous about how the dynamic would be, but I knew her intentions were good, so I decided to give it a chance. When I arrived, my husband, brother-in-law, father-in-law, M70, and, of course, my mother-in-law were there. The atmosphere was tense and no one really knew what to say until my mother-in-law, in her usual firm way, directly asked if anyone had something to say. The first to speak was my brother-in-law. He apologized for the hurtful text message he had sent me. He said he acted in the heat of the moment, trying to defend his brother, but now he realized how cruel he had been. I explained how much it had hurt me to receive that message and how unfair it was, especially knowing that my husband and I had been trying for almost a year to have a baby. He hung his head and mumbled something barely audible, but at least he admitted he was wrong. That was the last I heard from him for the rest of the lunch. Then, my mother-in-law turned her gaze to my husband, who avoided making eye contact with everyone. It was evident that he knew he was about to be confronted. After a few awkward moments, my mother-in-law finally spoke up and declared that my husband was no longer welcome in her house. She said she was deeply ashamed of his behavior and would rather dedicate her energy and space to her granddaughter than have someone so petty hanging around. My husband seemed like he wanted to say something, but just then, my mother-in-law mentioned the word granddaughter, and his expression completely changed. His eyes lit up, and he suddenly started crying. He had always wanted a daughter, and hearing that the baby was a girl deeply moved him. At that moment, he started talking about how happy he was and how much he wanted to be present for her. The next thing he did was ask to touch my belly and asked if he could come home to help paint the baby's room. I was clear and direct. I told him he was not welcome in my house. I reminded him that he had destroyed the trust we once had and couldn't just show up and act like nothing had happened. I explained that if I took him back, I would always live with the fear that he would disappear whenever things got tough, and I couldn't allow that. Visibly shaken, my husband asked me if this meant our marriage was over. Without hesitation, I told him I had already hired a lawyer. He began to panic, but I felt strangely calm, as if a blanket of peace had covered me at that moment. Normally, I'm someone who cries a lot, but this time, I didn't. I was completely certain of my decision. My husband argued that it wasn't fair, that he had just had a moment of panic, and now I was throwing away our life together and denying him his daughter. My father-in-law quickly intervened, reminding him that this was the same baby he had said he felt trapped by less than 2 weeks ago. My husband tried to justify his behavior by saying it had been a mistake and that he was stressed. But my mother-in-law asked him how he thought I felt. She asked him to put himself in my shoes. Being vulnerable, carrying our baby, and suddenly being accused of something so terrible by the person I trusted most. I told my husband that his fear wasn't a good enough excuse for the damage he caused. I reminded him how he broke my heart when he left, and how all my dreams of a beautiful family came crashing down in an instant. His only response was that he wanted those things with me and our daughter, but had let panic overwhelm him. I replied that if that were true, he wouldn't have needed his mother to drag him to my door to apologize. Despite all his words, at no point did he genuinely apologize. The lunch ended after a very long discussion, and my mother-in-law stood firm that my husband was not welcome in her house. He again tried to ask me if he could return to our home, but I made it clear that it was my house. I bought it before we got married, and that it needed to be a safe space for me. In other words, he wasn't welcome. Finally, on Friday, he was served the divorce papers at his workplace. My best friend's husband had prepared everything, but I wanted to wait until I was completely sure before sending them. Since then, I've received missed calls and tearful voicemails from him asking if I'm really willing to destroy our family. He even sent me a crying selfie sitting in his car, which my best friend found hilarious. My mother-in-law called me when she heard about the papers and assured me I was making the right decision. She told me she never wanted my marriage to end this way, or for her son to act so insensitively, but that she would always be here for me and her granddaughter. She even tried to apologize on my husband's behalf, but I told her that wasn't necessary. At the end of the day, his actions are his alone to take responsibility for. This weekend, my best friend stayed with me. We went shopping for baby clothes and spent some time picking out adorable outfits for my daughter. It was a little ray of sunshine in the middle of this storm. For now, I feel calmer and more confident that I'm making the right decision. I'll update again if anything major happens, but for now, I just want to focus on moving forward and preparing the best possible future for my daughter. Wish us luck.